Melissa, thank you for joining us in this real time of crisis. And
Yep.
you've, of course, talked about crisis readiness. Do you think we have been ready for this, or we caught flat-footed?
I don't think we've been ready for this at all. And I think that that's unfortunate because we could have been, we should have been. There's resources that have been trying to get, whether it's government or organizations, both ready for it. And then not just that, but so for example, I'm in the United States, and in North America over the last several weeks to a couple months, we've had a blessing where we were the last to get hit. So we, even just there, we had the capacity, if we would have chosen to observe, analyze what's happening around the world, know that this virus has no borders, that it is going to come here, and learn from places like Italy and Switzerland and Germany and, you know, South Korea and China. And even there were massive, massive opportunities that were missed.
Yeah. Is this as unprecedented as it gets, or do you think there are parallels of what we've dealt with here?
I don't know that it's as unprecedented as it gets, because we can't imagine, you know, the only thing that we can imagine is the worst we've ever experienced as human beings. It's kind of human nature. That being said, this is definitely unprecedented, even just in the sense, I mean, the world has faced pandemics before, global pandemics, but the world has never been as populated, as connected, you know, just what it is today, with social media, with just everything, all of the dynamics and aspects of our society, and our technological capabilities. So even just for that, this is unprecedented in terms of every single human right now is impacted around the world. And we have access to what they're experiencing and what they're going through. We're not segregated, we're not siloed, we are all connected.
Yeah, I saw, I think it was Tinder that recently released a feature where you can now swipe left or swipe right and connect with and have a virtual date with anyone around the world.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and you can actually speak with someone in Spain, like, how is it going? What's going on over there? Or someone in Fiji and saying, oh, I heard the virus just freezed you. How are you doing? And things like that. So, you know.
Wow, maybe that'll be interesting for, I mean, that's Tinder, right? So love connections. Who knows what the beautiful love stories that might emerge from that.
You never know. You never know. A post-apocalyptic world and what that might look like. Airlines, of course, are at the forefront of this crisis. They're being impacted left, right, and middle through this first industry to get a big hit. Is there anything they can learn from others, or just in dealing with this crisis?
I mean, learn from others. I think we can always learn from others. Airlines, you're right, are being massive, but their scale is so big. And because it's so globally impacted, connecting with one another. And I know that you have some great resources that you're doing that to bring different airlines and different, you know, executives and professionals within those airlines together. I think right now that's what the world needs to do. You know, if we're talking about global leaders, this is a global crisis. So it impacts everybody, and we need to be together. We need to get together. We need to connect and get through it together. That's the only way we're really going to get through this. So I think, I mean, amongst other things, that would be one of the first things that I would be looking at is we're not alone in this. We don't need to feel alone in this. And how can we reach out and create alliances and get through this together as an industry that services the world versus you alone and not being able, you know, you're stronger together. We are stronger together.
Right. That's definitely the thing. What would you, if you were to advise an airline, you know, what would you say should be the number one thing that they should be doing other than, you know, uniting with competitors?
At this point in time, so I mean, always when you're kind of looking at the landscape of whatever you're faced with or potentially faced with, is understanding 360 degrees of impact and risk and the knock-on effect of that, the domino effect of that. Because what we've experienced right now is the perfect storm. The perfect storm has happened. And it can get worse and it can get better. It will get better. But you know what I mean? So it's understanding all, because it's so multi-dimensional with multi-dimensional risk that spans across every country, every region, and every area of business, looking at 360 degrees of risk, what you're currently experiencing, impact, and how that all continues potentially to add up to the perfect storm and how to mitigate that. So basically being able to anticipate and have foresight. And then from there, at this point in time, because there's going to be phases of this crisis. 2 weeks ago was a different phase from what we're experiencing now, and in 2 weeks will be a different phase. So right now, you're looking at how do we sustain? How do we find a way to sustain? And then also the third layer there is looking at who do you want to be as a brand, as a professional, as a human being, as a brand, when all of this is said and done? And are you working towards that? Because this will end. And yes, our economy will be hit and we'll have to rebuild, but that's everybody's in this position. So when it's all said and done, what do you want to be proud of having had achieved? And right now, that's relationship.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point, especially because airlines deal, you said 360, they deal with so many people around them. Real lives are being impacted. And they're sort of in a catch-22 position. On one hand, they have to lay off and let go of employees so that they can even survive. On the other hand, they have to stop operating flights and not issue refunds, otherwise they will run out of cash, and instead issue vouchers to customers for future use. Given the situation, how do they build empathy or build brand trust, or stand not to lose this brand trust that they've invested so many years in building with both employees and customers?
So successful crisis management always requires two things to happen really, really effectively and simultaneous. And that's the right actions that need to be taken to stop the bleeding, to manage the actual incident, and to mitigate as much impact as possible. And the right communications need to be communicated. So actions is what we're talking about. How do you build in resiliency? How do you make sure that you survive this? And what are the tactics that need to be executed upon, and those strategies? And then with regards to your question, your latest question is communicating. If you're doing everything right from behind the scenes, but nobody knows, it's almost a moot point, because today, every single person has the power of a voice, and nobody, to use Dave Carroll's words, nobody is statistically insignificant or should be statistically insignificant. And really nobody is, right? We all have, with social media, we all have the power. So to have impact, and focusing on those communications in different ways, and focusing, so if you're looking at who do you want to be post all of this, how do you want to have served your country, your world, your people, and the different layers of your stakeholders through this. So because everything you do with regards to that, in alignment with that, builds trust, builds emotional connection in a time where people are looking for leadership, need leadership, and are scared and frightened, and any act of kindness that gives them relief and reassurance is going to make a heart tie between them and your brand. So in terms of how do you support people even though you're laying them off? And I think, Shashank, if I can, even you, can we talk about you for just a second? Something you just shared. So you just took a sabbatical, right?
Right.
Even just looking at this. So you took a sabbatical, which I think is so amazing. And before you did, you made sure that every single one of your employees had a job before you closed your doors for a year to take time with your family. Having that mindset, yes, people lost their job, but they went from one to the next and knew that there wasn't, you know what I mean? Like you didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I think that's the minimum responsibilities leaders have.
Agreed. But most companies, and I won't say most companies, a lot of companies miss things like that. So in these hardships, and it goes back to empathy. It goes to two things. It goes to stakeholder mapping, which is a crisis-ready tactic, and it goes to empathy. So stakeholder mapping is when you make a list of all of your different stakeholder groups, and you go through each one and you identify everything that they're feeling, that they expect in the brand, all the questions that you can anticipate that they're going to have. And if you put the empathy part puts you in their shoes. And if you know that, so for example, a risk within COVID-19 is fear. The escalation of fear creates panic, creates knee-jerk reactions, creates a lot of chaos. right? So it's a crisis within a crisis potentially. And even just losing your job and having that instability and not knowing how you're going to pay your rent or pay your mortgage in 4 months, because a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. So in 4 months, where does that leave you? If you know as a business that you have to lay off X amount of percentage of your population, but you also take the time to put yourself in their shoes and you say, okay, what's going to matter to them? And then what can we do? We can't, obviously if we could pay their mortgage in 4 months, we'd still have them on. So we can't do that. But what can we do to relieve or to alleviate some of that risk of panic, to reassure, to still connect with them, to let them know, or even to help them want to, when the economy, builds back up and we're hiring, we want them to want to come back to us, and we want them to want to come back to us and be excited to come back to us because of everything we did to serve them, even when we were suffering. That's the leadership that every organization needs to be thinking about. And that's that long-term foresight, or that long-term strategic kind of way of thinking that I'm talking about is.
I think what you're saying is absolutely bang on. You have to be human, you have to empathize, even if you have to, let's say, let go of staff. But observing some of the airline leaders, let's just say some of them are a bit more shy than others. So on one hand, we've seen Ed Sims at WestJet being really proactive. Every employee who was laid off who posted something, he's replying to them on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn proactively. But on the other hand, a large majority of the CEOs, let alone reply online on social media, are often scared to come in front of a camera, right?
So I would
what
say,
would they advise me to such leaders who are inherently shy?
Yeah, I don't know. So my first question would be, are you shy or are you fearful? Are you letting fear guide you? If it's fearful, then that's going to be emotion-based, and we can work through that to get you to where you need to be. If you can't get to where I would say you need to be, then yes, you're the CEO of a brand potentially, but the brand is bigger than just you. So who is the spokesperson on behalf of the brand for all of the people, for all of your people, right? And are you going to empower that person to be able to be proactive, to be able to be that heart link? And how can you support that person so that the rest of the world still sees you supporting, sees that that's a culture, that you're not a culture of one, that you're a culture of many, and that you're a culture for many. So there's ways to get around that. But first, before you even go there, I would be digging in and figuring out how come you don't want to. Is it fear-based? Is it that you really are shy, but at the same time, you wanted a leadership position that comes with responsibility and accountability? So there's levels there that don't take the job if you can't, do what needs to get done when your people need you to do it. So there's different dynamics, and there's always what I do with clients, and the reason why I work across so many industries around the world is because there's best practice, and then there's understanding the company, the business, its operations, its brand, its regulatory requirements, it's all of their business, and saying, how do we here's best practice, and here's why, and here's the outcome that we want. How do we adapt you to you so that you can still achieve that, but you can do that in a way that fits your culture and that puts you in the best possible position?
Right. That's a very, very important point, for it to be on brand. Take the best practice and adapt it to your own personal style, to the brand's style. And I think that's definitely important. Looking forward, I know lots of brands are focusing on response right now. But if you look at revival and thriving in whatever is going to be the new normal, what do you think brands need to do to survive future crisis, or make sure that they're crisis ready for what's to come next?
Oh, that's a good question. So one, to survive now and then to thrive later is everything we've just talked about, right? And more, but very high level, good place to start is getting into that mindset, understanding that and committing to that, and then figuring out what that means for you. Later, we started this conversation off by saying there was massive missed opportunity to save lives, had certain people who had the power to do so chosen to say, here's what's happening, let's actually observe this, let's actually understand it, and let's figure out what we can do, how we can do better, because we have a blessing right now that we have that happening in front of us, and that it hasn't hit us yet. As an example, same thing goes. There are very, very few organizations who were not blindsided by this. They didn't need to be, because when you have a crisis-ready culture, which is what I'm all about, then you have built resiliency into the fibers of your organization, into the fibers of every single one of your employees. So it's not about having a crisis management plan, it's about having a culture, right? That is proactive, that is instinctive and reflexive, and identifies early on and knows what to do with that identification early on. That's where you want that. If every organization were crisis ready prior to this world right now, today would be a different place. We'd be looking at something different. We can do that moving forward, but we have to choose to be able to want to do that. So yes, we need to manage through this. Yes, we need to survive through this, and we need to thrive post this. But then human nature is typically to forget. We forget what labor pains are. We forget pain and misery, and that's a wonderful thing in so many aspects, but not when it leaves us increasingly vulnerable. So if we don't want to be blindsided in the future, and if we want to, crisis-ready culture looks at any type of event, negative event in an organization, be it everyday issues straight through to COVID-19 catastrophic world crises, that you are able to respond in a way that increases the trust and credibility in your brand. That ultimately, I say, is building an invincible brand. And post this, it's how can you make it so that never again are you in the position that you found yourself in 3 weeks ago or 2 months ago when it started impacting your community and your revenue stream. And that's possible, but you have to make the choice to want to commit to it.
Right. You're absolutely right. Being future ready requires reflection right now, and reflection not just on actions, but processes and what exactly you have done right now to be future ready. Yeah,
absolutely.
Is there any one very important piece of advice you'd like to give to airlines who are actually struggling with this right now?
Well, first is just how awful this all is for everybody, and it's awful to watch. I mean, I sit on calls with CEOs and founders that have to be strong every single day for their families and for their people, and they get on the call with me, and we've created a space where they are strong, but they don't have to be strong like that anymore. And so I experience the fallout of the weight that they're holding, that emotion, and that, so, and I don't wish that upon anybody. And I know that that's how everybody feels right now. So for that, I'm so, I don't know, saddened for everybody. So with that, it's continue to do what's right. I think the biggest thing right now is to always to look at the long term with that weight, with those emotions, with the impact of what you're experiencing and the unknown and all of the doom and gloom that that you could be kind of tunnel visioned on. Choices, business choices, communication choices that can hurt you in the future. That might feel good now, but it's fear-based and it will hurt you in the future. So I think the biggest thing is, I guess if I were to just say one thing, is to keep being strong and keep that long-term, who do you want to be when all of this is over? Because the economy will build itself back again. We don't know how long it'll take, but it will. And how you end up surviving and thriving then, it depends on your actions and your communications that you choose to take every single moment of every single day now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for those deeply useful insights, Melissa. And I'm sure this will be useful to a number of the airlines who will hopefully watch this.
I hope so. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak with them.
Thank you.